The issue of the protected minors in the Balearic Islands comes to public attention because a 13-year-old girl is raped in a building. When that girl is rescued, it comes to light that all the girls under the care of the administration in the Balearic Islands are being sexually exploited. All of them. The European Union launched an investigation into the situation of protected girls in the Balearic Islands. In Congress, the deputies from the Socialist Party and Podemos veto an investigation committee.
You must have received support from feminist associations, right?
None.
How?
None.
Going back to the Cot Cabezudo case, all the political groups represented in Congress were informed about the Cot Cabezudo case. None of them acted. What did the Socialist Party do? They all knew the case well, including Pedro Sanchez, yet did nothing. The Popular Party did nothing. Podemos, fully aware, also did nothing.
Here comes my question, and I think it's extremely important and relevant. Who are usually the perpetrators of these sexual assaults? The administration, people with a certain amount of power within it.
In my experience, there are two groups. One,
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Factory. Today is a special episode because let's say it's a continuation, a part 2 of the magnificent episode we had with Melchor Miralles, talking about the Cote Cabezudo case, but this time we have the honor of having the founder of the Poetic Justice Association and the victim's lawyer, Mario Diaz. How are you, gentlemen? All good?
So great being here with you, nothing could be better.
it's a pleasure to be here as well. So,
First of all, I want to thank you for your courage in uncovering so many things. And the first thing I want to ask you about is the Poetic Justice Association. What is the reason for this association's existence and how did it come about?
when exactly? When did the Cote Cabezudo case become public after the viral video on March 8, 2018? When? Which is a video that I upload to YouTube. When? When I see that there is no legal way out of the matter because the presiding judge, Ana Isabel Perez Asenjo, is issuing one decision after another that are not in accordance with the law, and for more than 5 years, we are trying to push the proceedings forward, making requests for provisional detention for Cote Cabezudo, who wouldn't stop intimidating the victims. Well, with every complaint he received, he would retaliate against the woman who reported him. So then, when I see that after 5 years of going by the book, of using all the legal resources that need to be used, I realize I'm up against a wall and the answer is no to everything. Well, in that desperation, the only thing I can think of is to tell what's happening in the heart of the Cote Cabezudo case in a video, which miraculously goes viral. That viralization led me to receive support from many people who ask, how can we help you with this? In what way can we lend a hand? And that's when the idea of forming the association comes up. Keep in mind that the video was released on March 8, 2018, and the association was established on August 6 of that same year. Seeing that popular momentum generated by that video, which was watched by more than 7.5 million people, according to a news report from La Sexta, so we look for a way to channel that. And so there are two sides to it. On one hand, the social support, and on the other, the viral spread of the video about the Cote Cabezudo case. What it brings me is many more cases, victims of other proceedings, of other cases similar to Cote Cabezudo's. They get in touch with me saying that, yeah, this is happening to us too, we have the same problem. So I see the opportunity to bring together everything that's happening and is in the shadows with social support, which is connected to cases similar to Cote Cabezudo's. And so we founded the Poetic Justice Association, which in its statutes, its social purposes are the defense of women and children who are victims of crimes against their sexual freedom. And and the fight against judicial corruption, against everything we initially experienced in the Cote Cabezudo case. And sadly, we've been able to see that it's not an isolated case. That when there are cases involving minors, cases involving trafficking, cases involving sexual crimes linked to powerful people, well, what we see is that there are obstacles at the judicial level, Well, the Poetic Justice Association, just so you get an idea, we are popular prosecution in the case of the fostered minors in the Balearic Islands, which was an absolute scandal and is not free from irregularities. I mean, just so you get an idea, last week we were notified that the Provincial Court of Palma de Mallorca is returning us to the proceedings, because the investigating judge of Palma de Mallorca decided that the Asociación Justicia Poética could not be a party in that case. And then they remove us from the case. They drop the charges against the director of the Mallorcan Institute of Social Affairs without the participation of Justicia Poética. And the provincial court has to step in. I mean, something very similar to what happened in the Cote Cabezudo case. Do you have an investigation that only puts up obstacles, that issues rulings not in accordance with the law to the detriment of the accusations, and acts with the popular prosecution of poetic justice outside the procedure? And after a year and a half, a court ruling comes that says it was not lawful to remove poetic justice from the investigation of that case.
But they have managed.
But they have already cleared Javier de Juan, director of the Mallorcan Institute of Social Affairs, of all charges.
They managed to spend a year and a half investigating without him being part of the case. Poetic justice, and a year and a half later. You say they sure took their time, didn't they? And this is a case that actually happened, right? While she was president of the Balearic Islands, a lady named Francina Armengol, who is now the president of the Congress of Deputies.
Just so people have some context, we know what we're talking about. I want us to give a brief summary of the case of the minors under guardianship in Mallorca. And for everyone, because it's likely that we'll have new viewers who haven't seen our show, Melchor, and the topic of Cote Cabezudo. Above all, a very brief summary, so that right now the audience, now that we're starting the show, has the knowledge and the tools to be able to follow everything that's discussed here.
Mario Bueno, time to do it.
The issue of the minors under guardianship in the Balearic Islands comes to public attention because a 13-year-old girl is raped in a building. And when? Well, when that girl is rescued, it comes to light that all the minors under the care of the administration in the Balearic Islands are being sexually exploited. All the educators know that this is happening, and they have notified the administration. I mean, it was like common knowledge among the educators at the centers that all the girls ended up being prostituted. It's not just that they arrive, it's that they show up with new shoes or with a phone, and all of that comes from sexual exploitation. That is, we have the administration taking custody of minors because they say they're neglected, meaning their parents aren't fit to take care of those girls. Under the administration's custody, they all end up in sex exploitation networks. This is the first case in which the Asociación Justicia Poética gets involved, but as a result, we learned that the same thing is happening in Asturias. In which, well, Justicia Poética is handling the defense of a minor who was sexually assaulted and left in a coma, practically because of drugs. Incited by the administration while under its guardianship, to leave the center by the center itself. The issue of child guardianship in Spain is a very lucrative business. Institutions receive about 4,000 euros a month for each minor in their guardianship to take care of that minor. So, of course, if you have a company where you get 4,000 for every child you take into guardianship, you're going to take in as many children as you can and getting rich. And then what happens? That in the centers, the children are cannon fodder for sexual exploitation networks, for recruitment, and the juvenile centers. Huh? I mean, they don't have the tools, they don't have the resources. And nobody cares about those children. Do you know about the minors under guardianship in the Balearic Islands and how the scandal reached the European Union when it broke out? And the European Union ordered to find out what was happening with the girls under guardianship in the Balearic Islands? In the Congress of Deputies, the Socialist Party and Podemos, you know, they veto an investigation committee.
And he still presides over the Congress of Deputies. The lady who was the president of the Autonomous Community of the Balearic Islands, and therefore the ultimate political authority, at least for what happened.
The minors who were raped were generally women, girls, right?
Boys too, but obviously the greater vulnerability is among girls.
I imagine that your association, and in the case of Cote Cabezudo, and in the case of the minors under guardianship who were raped in the Balearic Islands and Asturias, you must have received support from feminist associations. Is that right?
Zero?
How?
Zero feminism, institutional feminism, huh? Do they care at all? We've seen it with Cote Cabezudo and the minors under guardianship in the Balearic Islands given the scale of the scandal. Have you ever heard Irene Montero beating her chest over the minors under guardianship in the Balearic Islands? Or about events in Asturias? The exact same thing is happening in Madrid. It's widespread, but, right? I mean, actually, every time there's, right, a context in which there's a risk for minors, right? Huh? Risk for women. And there's a political intention. I mean, the institutional feminism is another business that gets millions to organize high heel races, to put up purple spots. But an association like Judicial Poetica, we have to survive on private donations, and we're handling cases with a lack of resources.
I encourage all the viewers to, go to Judicial Poetica and help us out, okay? If you can, even if it's just €1 a month, okay? Because as Mario says, all this work is being done, without resources, and we don't have any public funding, nor do we want public money. And it's a task, I think, that's very important. And then, regarding the administration and the centers, Mario has explained the matter briefly, but perfectly. I want to share a fact that is shocking. And it's that in these centers where the administration sends minors, taking them away from their family environments, the first thing they do in these centers is the same thing that those who deal with human beings in brothels do, which is the first thing they do. Jota, take away their documents, right? Is this known? Well, these minors, as soon as they enter these centers, their national identity document is taken away from them. I mean, it's like in trafficking networks.
And he is there, but the difference is that, from what I'm understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, in these trafficking networks, the main actor is the state. That's true?
Well, the state,
the state delegates
profits from it.
That is to say,
the state creates a business, which is the guardianship of minors, where the state is supposed to invest resources to protect children who are unprotected. The reality is that this creates a business that is linked to supposedly non-profit entities, which are mostly connected, also to political parties or friends, and who take on the care of those children. At 4,000 a month, and
4,000 in public funds.
of course, obviously that comes from public funds, from budgets. And what happens is the children are in complete neglect. That is to say, it's not that a minister comes to abuse a child, it's that children are taken into care and then no one really takes responsibility for protecting them. Just so you see, probably where we've seen it from beginning to end. How does the state intervene in the guardianship of a child? Who is then left unprotected? A girl in this case who is unprotected, who is sexually assaulted with absolute neglect from the administration. Well, this is the case that comes to Poetic Justice of a minor who contacts Poetic Justice through our WhatsApp number while being locked up in a juvenile center. After having been raped and after spending a few days in a coma, because the police found her after she was raped. And she asked me to help her in such a way that, well, we evaluated the case and it falls within the statutes of the association. All right, let's get into this matter. First obstacle, how can a minor get a lawyer in Spain? This girl who is 16 years old, she's 15, 16 years old. She wants to appoint me as her lawyer and for Justicia Poetica to defend her in the case being opened for her rape and before the authorities to guarantee her rights. Well, in order for that girl to be able to appoint a lawyer, she has to run away from her center. So that I can go with her to a notary, and before the notary she can say that she wants me to be her lawyer to defend her in her rape case. And what happens with the authorities if we go to the notary without an identification because the authorities take her identification away? And then you go to a notary so that someone can sign a power of attorney. Either you have documentation or you have to go with 2 adult witnesses who can certify that you are who you say you are. So I have to find 2 people who know who this girl is and have them come to the notary as well to certify that this girl wants to appoint me. Her lawyer is who he says he is. I get a notarial certificate and also find a notary who has the courage to make you a document of that kind. I get the notary, I get the document, a proper appointment of counsel, and when I leave the notary's office, I go to my office. And the police find the girl and arrest her and take her back to the center. While they're arresting her, she WhatsApps me. In the afternoon, I visit the juvenile center, which operates under a closed regime. And I go with my notarial deed and record the conversation with the educator who attends me. I say, I'm here to see my client, notarial deed, appointment as attorney, and she tells me, no, you can't see the girl. This has to be authorized by the Principality of Asturias, and I say, excuse me, so the Principality of Asturias has to authorize a fundamental right, which is legal assistance. Excuse me, what are you saying I want to see? I tell my client, no, you're not going to see her, talk to the department. I say, no, I'm not going to see her. I'm going to call the civil guard and have them file a report that with a notarial deed, you are not letting me see my client. A murderer has to be able to see his lawyer. The police arrest a rapist, a murderer, and access to his lawyer is immediate and he appears before a judge in less than 72 hours. I told him, listen, you're denying a minor rights that even the worst criminal in this country has. No, well, he's not going to know, and with an attitude, well, he's not going to know. I don't know what. Fine, so I call the civil guard and I call the civil guard. The civil guard arrives at the juvenile center door. And they tell him no. The civil guard tells me, Mario, right? We can't go in either, and the civil guard suggests to me that there are punishment cells inside the juvenile center. Well, then I go to a court to file a habeas corpus to tell a judge. I have my client, a minor, being held inside a closed center. I have been appointed as her lawyer and the center won't let me assist her. And I don't know what's happening with that minor inside the center. They dismiss my habeas corpus saying there's no illegal detention. Well, they dismiss my habeas corpus. I go to the court where the case about the rape this girl suffered is being investigated. Well, it takes a month and a half for a judge to issue a court order so that the Principality of Asturias allows a lawyer to see his underage client. I mean, the administration that's supposed to protect the minor. It has to be ordered by a judge so that the fundamental rights of that girl are not violated and she can see her lawyer. And what happens when I go with that order to see my client? I mean, at the juvenile center, like as if I were, they take away my phone, they almost run a detector over me, obviously, so I don't record anything inside. And of course, when they bring the minor down to me, the director of the juvenile center tells me no, she has requested that an educator be present. When you watch, I brought the statement of the accused in the rape case for us to watch together. I said I want to be alone with my client because I have the right to communicate confidentially with my client. Automatically. The girl tells me, Mario, they forced me to sign a paper that says I want the educator to be present. I asked her, but how did you sign that, Mario? 23 hours a day in a punishment cell. I mean, they lock me up. 23 hours a day in a 2x2 room where the only thing there is a mattress, and if I cause too much trouble, they even take away the mattress. And I get out for half an hour to play partisi with an educator, and when I need to use the bathroom, I call. I mean, in a Western country, with supposed guarantees of rights? I mean, imagine a criminal in prison reporting that, the chaos it would cause, and me with the minor story. Huh? Prepare a criminal complaint for the crime of torture. How can you keep a child in a punishment cell for 23 hours? However, the civil guard had already informed me that this existed. So I filed a complaint in a court of instruction and they accept the complaint. And the reason given by the investigating judge is that no, there can't be a punishment cell because the facilities are certified. Listen, I'm talking about a room that's enough, a room where you can lock someone up. Here's the story, and when should I file the complaint? I was already going with witnesses. Because this minor gives me the contact information of other girls who are now adults, who have already been kicked out of the center and who live there and tell me about torture. Mario, in juvenile centers, there are camera blind spots. One said, they slammed my head on a fire extinguisher. There was a boy they made kneel on chickpeas with plates in his hands, and if he dropped the fruit he was holding, they would hit him. I mean, and you talk, of course, when you get into this, you end up contacting a lot of people who have been through juvenile centers. It's hell. I mean, they tell you some things. And what happens? That since they're minors, since they can't access their documentation, I mean, the ordeal for that girl to get a lawyer is something we've experienced in the Asociación Justicia Poetica. Do you know what happened? As soon as the judge said, this is her lawyer and he needs to see the girl, within 20 days they gave custody back to the mother. That is, a minor is only protected as long as they don't have legal representation. Once that girl got a lawyer, she was no longer unprotected.
I understand, and I have a question, right?
Can I follow up with you later? What is Mario describing? It's chilling, but which part is chilling?
I'm struggling with this.
Well, that's the reality, the countless cases of minors who, because a neighbor heard some screams in a house and called social services. And it's, well, a minor who, might have a complicated relationship with their parents, but they're not unprotected or anything. It's just that they've had a situation. But a neighbor called because they heard some screams and banging. Social services arrive, they take the minor away, just like I'm telling you. They take the minor away, and they put him in a center. That's how it works. That's how it works, Jota.
And there's a statistical reality.
Another case from Zaragoza. Sorry, Mario. They took a kid in a situation just like the one I just told you about, and he didn't have any serious problems either. And I remember a conversation with his mother, and she told me, yes, well, we had arguments. Well, like so many parents with their kids, and they took him to a center, right? And I said, but why are they going to take my son away from me? And after 12 or 13 days, they called him from the center and said, hey, come over here. Your son has been found hanged in the room.
And the son had problems.
Or, well...
But
the son was at home, and they took him out. He lived there with his family. They took him away, put him in a center, and he ended up committing suicide.
Well.
He committed suicide or was forced to, I'm not sure.
He ended up hanged. He ended up hanged by his own hanging.
From his bunk bed.
We're talking about an 8-year-old boy.
8 years old?
Yeah, I mean...
They take him away from his family. I have to ask here, was there any reason, any cause for which they took him away from his family?
Well...
So what was the reason for the issue?
The very serious problem with guardianships in Spain is the lack of protection. It's decided based on a technical report from someone who doesn't even have to be licensed. I mean, a social services technician. That's what Melchor says because a neighbor heard that one argument was louder than another. He signs a report stating the child is at risk.
That one is at risk.
And then social services grabs the child and takes him to a center.
So there doesn't have to be any evidence that the child is at risk. There just has to be a report. A report is enough to remove a minor.
Of course.
A report, that is,
yes,
they're going after.
From social services, not from a psychologist, not from a psychiatrist, not from a social services specialist.
Does something similar happen with victims of gender-based violence when there's a report from a woman who has studied gender studies? Is this enough to decide if she deserves compensation for psychological abuse?
Exactly.
I recorded it here. And this? I mean, I already, as president of Poetic Justice, was at the Congress, When the protection law was discussed, the so-called Rhodes Law of the Pianist, the law for the protection of adolescence and childhood. When the state takes custody of a child, that case can take up to 2 years to appear before a judge. That is, you are a parent and social services comes and takes your child. And what is the procedure for you? To oppose the order of removal to your child's declaration of abandonment. The first thing is that the technical report is presumed to be truthful. So, right? I mean, the first step is to find a way to challenge that presumption of truthfulness. It's a tortuous process when dealing with the administration. And by the time you get in front of a judge, at least 2 years have passed with your child in that situation, right? They're separated from you in a center.
With the conditions we've mentioned?
With what we've discussed. So what's the, for me, creepy thing that I found out? Statistically, with the minors under guardianship, almost all the minors under guardianship that I have had access to entered the juvenile centers and under the guardianship of the administration without having committed crimes and without having been victims of crimes, mainly of a sexual nature, and within the administration under the guardianship of the state. They commit crimes and are victims of crimes against their sexual freedom. So is it surreal for you to say, no, I'm bringing this child with me because they're at risk and under your guardianship? He becomes a criminal and suffers crimes, mostly against his sexual freedom. There is a study about children under guardianship that determines that a child under the administration's guardianship is 400 times more likely to suffer a sexual assault than one not under the administration's guardianship.
Here comes my question, and I think it's extremely important and relevant. Who are usually the perpetrators of these sexual assaults? The administration, people with a certain amount of power within it.
Well, in my experience, there are two groups. One, all the people who are aware of the system. That is, people who hang around juvenile centers to recruit minors. Well, the thing is, you know that teenagers go to juvenile centers and they're extremely vulnerable. First, because in juvenile centers, almost everyone is mistreated because they live in certain conditions. In some places, they don't even give you food or clothes. I mean, a kid from a juvenile center goes out on the street and anyone can hurt them. Like what happened to the girls in state care in the Balearic Islands. They give you some shoes, they give you a phone, they give you 30 euros, and you end up in sexual exploitation networks. And then, well, there's another side, which is those who take advantage of that vulnerability, right? Well, being with him, with the Cote Cabezudo case, another scandal broke out in the Basque country regarding a juvenile center where the minors were engaged in prostitution. That is, there were adults who arranged meetings with those minors and had sexual encounters. And who was in charge of the organization that took custody of those children? A senator from the Basque Nationalist Party. So it's like, I mean, in the end, well, I mean, we're talking about the sexual integrity of a minor, right? Well, if you put them in a situation where you deprive them of their main protection, which is their parents, I mean, I see kids whose parents are supposedly not fit to take care of them, and the parents are desperate to make sure nothing happens to those kids. And the girl I'm defending in the Principality of Asturias, it's her mother who, through Instagram accounts, finds out where she's being raped. And she goes to the police to say, please go to this address, my daughter is there. That stories are being posted where she appears doing drugs with some guy.
And then
And the administration, it's like this.
that a lot of people will criticize me. But I've met many women and men who work in these social services. And you have to see them. And you say these people are the ones making decisions about minors? I mean, I get it because I can see the astonishment on your face because it looks like a horror movie.
Truly,
But this is the reality, man. This is what's happening and what we're seeing all day long.
I wish it would surprise me because it would mean I'm not so deep into this yet, but it doesn't surprise me. It just horrifies me to know that this also happens in Spain. I want to discuss a very sensitive topic based on something you said earlier. The obstacles that the judicial system puts in place when it comes to handling, as it should, cases that involve minors and people in positions of power. Within the administration, have you come across many relevant people involved in these cases? How does the justice system typically work in these cases?
Well, if the paradigm of this is the Cote Cabezudo case, I think that's true. The documentary in their name gives some insights beyond just being the story of Cote Cabezudo's victims.
We send them a big greeting from here. I want you to know I'll keep exposing this and make sure it reaches as many people as possible. Anyone, if necessary, even at my own expense.
Just look at that. June 2022 ruling. To this day, the victims remain uncompensated.
Whether this fight is over laughable compensation,
Laughable. You can see this in how things are handled. Like if there's an interest. in taking sides, you know? Politics of an issue. You talk about a justice that seems from another country, different, when the victims are those the system doesn't care about. Well, let me give you an example when it comes up, you know? When the Danny Alves case comes up,
Damn.
the Danny Alves case is a different matter.
Huh?
And there's a conviction and a compensation of 150,000 euros for Danny's victim, for the alleged victim of Danny Alves.
And I want to make a small clarification about this. When the verdict itself says that the accuser's version is not supported by the graphic evidence from the videos.
No, of course.
I mean, look, as of today, he is innocent. He has been acquitted. In the end, this is just simply brutal. Sorry, but I had to do that.
Of course.
Because in the actual ruling it says, even though there are contradictions, not to mention lies, regarding the accuser's version and the cameras from the establishment where the events took place, I think it says it almost literally. I have a good memory since he has been consistent over time, convicted, and it's like, damn.
Of course we have, because also look, if we draw a parallel between the case of Danny Alves and Cote Cabezudo, these are cases in which there are videos of the events in both.
Absolutely.
All right, in one, the court says, well, even though we can determine that in what is recorded, everything the victim said is a lie,
We condemn that this is the case of Alves.
which is the case of Alves. Everything that was recorded contradicts what she said happened. Basically, in what we can see, she's lying, yes, and we believe her in what we can't see. For Cote Cabezudo, it's the opposite. Everything recorded shows the victims told the truth, right? We acquit, which is crazy, in 90, I don't know the percentage. But out of all the sexual assault charges that Cote Cabezudo was accused of, he was convicted of 2. And more than 75 sexual assault charges were being requested. Many of them were recorded. So, of course, and then you see a compensation of 150,000 euros for events that we know how they were described. In the case of Danny Alves, well, all the victims of Cote Cabezudo who obtained a guilty verdict, all of them together don't add up. What was granted to that other victim? Among all the victims of Cote Cabezudo, 10 sexual offenses. Among all of them, it adds up to 116,000 euros in compensation to be divided among 7 women. So, of course, you see, well, like depending on who the aggressor is and who the victim is, justice works one way or another.
So, do you agree 100% with the statement that feminism creates first-class and second-class victims?
Well, I think that feminism works, well, to begin with, I think that institutional feminism works to make every woman a victim. I'm not talking about the legal level anymore, but about this whole discourse of victimization. That is to say, nowadays, any woman who is involved in the prevailing feminism feels like a victim.
And they live off women believing that they are victims just for being women, whether they are victims or not.
And at the same time, that imperative feminism that treats all women as victims, as you have told me, stays silent in front of the real victims.
So,
It's a paradox, you know?
do you know who it is?
Because the three of us are more feminists. I mean, feminists or not, I like talking to feminists. But we're fighting more for the rights of the victims, for their dignity. You two are way above my level. I'm just giving you my platform to speak. I'm not competing. This isn't a contest.
One will do exactly what.
But that's the point I want to make. You two are practically dedicating your lives to giving dignity and justice to minors under guardianship, raped under the administration. To the victims of Cote Cabezudo, to every person or every woman who is a victim, especially minors. I understand that's poetic justice, and feminism is what impresses me the most. Irene Montero, Ministry of Equality. Absolute silence. Well,
Total silence or even concealment?
If not outright concealment.
I mean, not just silence, I also mean when you veto something in a vote. Investigate cases like those involving supervised minors in the Balearic Islands. I mean, you get involved in making sure it isn't investigated, which is something else entirely. I mean, it's crazy that political representatives faced with a scandal of sexual assaults against minors under state care would vote not to investigate it. So let's see, we've seen this in the Cote Cabezudo case. A member of Podemos in the Basque Country asked the party to give a voice to the victims and to have this investigated. When it was just starting and they kicked him out of Podemos, I mean, I think he was with you, right? In an interview, yes.
Ideological hours, no matter if he's in the sanctity.
That they forbade him.
We have to honor that man because he is consistent with what he stands for.
I don't say his name because I can't remember his first or last name. Would he care if you said no?
I think he left. Well,
So I honor that former Podemos member. Though we're ideological opposites, you still need to be consistent. And what I miss is consistency from feminism, consistency from the progressive side that claims to champion the cause for women. And truly, now comes a very important question. What governments were there in almost all these cases? Who was governing? Where were these underage girls who were in care and abused?
Progressives, those who call themselves that.
That hasn't happened. You said before that, well, it also happens in Madrid.
Madrid has cases. Madrid has cases too.
But if it is, it's not an issue.
The problem for me with the issue of guardianships is endemic. I mean,
It's not about PP, Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, or Vox.
that happens at all youth centers. Because the system encourages it, and because, of course, everyone in power is just trying to keep the peace. But
And don't those who govern make sure that doesn't happen? I mean,
Wherever they're from.
from Spanish Socialist Workers' Party, from PP, or whatever.
In the Balearic Islands, who was in power when everything happened with the girls in foster care? Progressives in Asturias.
progressives, Spanish Socialist Workers' Party,
Madrid has many blatant cases.
also so widespread in cases of juvenile centers in Madrid, it's happening too. So we can't, and they've tried to cover it up. Or to be serious,
We also have, yes,
yes, this is a problem, but it's a political problem. I mean, when I go to Congress regarding the amendments to the Child and Adolescent Protection Law, I mean, I'm standing in front of all the representatives from all the political groups and I tell them, listen, we're an association dedicated to this and you're going to legislate on the protection of children and adolescents. Legislate two very simple things that none of you will be able to tell me. I mean, it's not obvious first
let me see if I remember what I had in mind.
that any minor can easily access an unregulated one. Appoint a lawyer.
Appoint a lawyer.
That's what I was saying.
Hey, don't you all think it's just common sense and that you should all agree with this measure? 102, that any minor who is going to be apprehended by the state to be taken away from their parents. Just like what happens with any criminal within 72 hours, they must appear before a judge who will determine if the abandonment declaration is valid.
Hey, it's true that I think I've missed something here. I mean, when a child is taken away from a family because, according to a social services technician, the child was at risk, we already know this can be subjective and it can depend on whatever the social services worker feels like doing. There isn't a judicial process to see if that's true or not, just with the report.
The child is taken away and
That's it.
yes, there is a legal process. If the family objects, that puts you in front of a judge 2 years later.
Is it true? Did you say it?
So when? When the police detain an individual for whatever reason, when an authority detains someone, that person must be brought before a judge within 72 hours so that the judge can determine if the deprivation of that person's freedom of movement has been in accordance with the law or not. And I said to the representatives, do you think it's normal that the worst murderer has more rights than a child? And none of them, I mean, they didn't even look up. I mean, the hearing is recorded. They didn't lift their heads from the papers. They couldn't even look me in the eyes. And I told them, look, this is the amendment process. Include those two rights for every child because it's a matter of conscience. I mean that they can have a lawyer and that if they're taken by the state, they should be brought before a judge within 72 hours like any criminal.
Question for both of you. Do you think that this attitude of the deputies towards some more than reasonable questions that you raised, in a certain sense, makes them accomplices? Or what's your view on why they don't want to get involved in such a tricky matter?
Obviously, it makes them accomplices because they are the ones who have the ability to change the situation by legislating, and therefore, in my opinion, of course, it makes them accomplices, right? Going back to the Corte Cabezuro case, all the political groups represented in Congress were informed about the Corte Cabezuro case. None of them did anything, and Vox made a mockery of it. What is it? In an intervention by Odon Elorza, huh? Macarena Olona, if I'm not mistaken, huh? When you were a Vox deputy, you said to him, Mr. Elorza, you were talking about whatever, and you say, huh? Did you call him miserable? You said the miserable ones are the pedophiles. First, if you say that to a congressman, you have to explain why you're saying it. And out of 300, 50. I don't know how many honorable members are sitting there. You say that to one person, you bring that up, and nobody says, hey, Miss Solona, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Even Mr. Olorza doesn't respond. That is to say, huh? And that's all Vox was able to do in the Congress of Deputies. And on another occasion, what happened? Also, what did he say to Elorza? He used it in some speech, I don't know which, and said, no, because this is giant, and said, are you more than giants? Talk about big heads. I mean, with all the information about the case, quote big head. To Vox. What he came up with are these two silly things there on an exchange day during interventions, right? The Socialist Party, knowing the case perfectly well, starting with Pedro Sanchez and then doing nothing. The Popular Party, which knew the case in detail, did nothing. Podemos, which knew the case in detail, did nothing. So, when you know about a very serious matter and do nothing, you put yourself you do nothing even though you put yourself in a situation of complicity. I'm not speaking in legal terms, but in moral and political terms, well, of course.
But, and look, I would even go further than Melchor. I mean, the political groups are complicit by omission, but society is also complicit. I mean, how can it be that there are people who are speaking up about this with all the documentation available to anyone who wants to receive it, and we are the ones who put the politicians where they are? I mean, for this to happen in a society where childhood should be the most sacred thing, we know that this happens and nothing is done about it. Something so basic, I mean, everything that happens with minors, and that is, right? Verifiable. And that as a society, we don't put our foot down and it just happens. And the scandals happen. They generate outrage in society like, oh yes, and so on, and the next day it's forgotten.
Yes, but just like the corruption of Pedro Sanchez, of all of the entire political class.
So, and of course I can understand, you know? Well, that there are things that one might say, well, you just let them go. Well, yes, politicians steal, but when you're saying they're taking children who are tortured, who end up in child trafficking, in sexual exploitation, I mean, what are we doing? Are we sick as a society with educators? This, I mean, when I talk about it, it sounds like science fiction. When I had the case with the minor, I had to go to the notary, and then when I went to court, of course, to court, The minor is accompanied by an educator as she remains under authorities' care. The educator arrives with a with a card holder and opens the card holder. Here are all the children's identification cards. I said, this woman comes here, right? I told the teacher, give the girl's identification card to her immediately. It's always the same. I just follow the principality's orders.
That's why I say it and I repeat it. And I publicly accuse them of having these children kidnapped just like the women who are prostituted against their will. The traffickers, the first thing they do is take away their documents. The same thing the authorities do. I mean, they have them kidnapped, they take away their documents. It's just unbelievable.
It's taking away their identity. Without an identification, where can you go?
You can't do anything.
So, of course, right? Notice how deeply the cancer has taken hold. I told her and the educator that it's a crime you could go to jail for. The identification is personal, non-transferable, and must be kept safe by each person as required by law.
And what's more, when a police officer asks you for your identification, the law only requires you to show it, not to hand it over. I've had arguments, I've even ended up in court. For refusing to hand it over, I don't give my identification, identify yourself. Yes, sir, here is my identification, give it to me. I say, no, the identification is mine. And I'm not obligated to give my identification to anyone. That's why I say these kids are being held hostage and...
At that level, in that court, with that back and forth. The educator tells me she won't give him the identification, and of course I told the educator, I said, what do you think will happen if I go to the Guardia Civil who are right there at the entrance at the security checkpoint? And I tell him that you have taken the documents, the identification from my client. She laughs and says, go ahead. And it was like, oh, well, go ahead. So I went to the civil guard and it caused a big scene there. I told the people, that woman is a government employee. I mean, she's an educator at the juvenile center. Well, she has the identification cards of all the kids. She's holding my client's identification card, and the civil guard went there and told her to hand over the identification card immediately to its owner. Well, not exactly, but to hand over the identification card. And of course, right there in front of the educator, with the girl receiving the identification card, I said to her, did you see what happened? Never give your identification card to anyone. It belongs to you. Well, of course, right? That's what I'm telling you. 20 days later, the girl was no longer in a vulnerable situation, and that was it. And the administration, in no time at all, issued a report saying that the girl had improved a lot. And what about with her mother? Why? Because she has a lawyer, and a kid with a lawyer is a pain in the ass for the administration. Because, of course, I used to go to the center, and the rights under the European Convention on the Rights of the Child. Well, it blows up any juvenile center where none of a child's rights are respected. The girl held in a juvenile center. The law says that every 3 months a report has to be sent to the court, and that the public prosecutor has to make sure that the girl in that juvenile center is okay. Hey, when I got to the girl's case, it had been 1 year and 2 months without any reports, and I went to the court. What is this? So if I issue a ruling to take custody of a child, does that mean the child's rights are over? The child no longer has any rights? They don't even do the visits every 3 months. No one makes sure they're healthy, they're not fed well, and they're not dressed properly. And this girl I represent leaves the juvenile center because she's in a terrible condition. And an educator tells her, get out of here, no one is going to misuse to a girl in a juvenile center, and the girl leaves, and 3 days later she ends up being raped. Because additionally, a minor is under state care. What happens is that when they find themselves in a difficult situation, they can't go back to their parents' house. So their parents get accused of kidnapping, which is already like the icing on the cake, and then
The saddest thing for me about all of this, Jota, do you know what it is? That this conversation we're having will be broadcast.
And they'll demonetize it like the first one. Well,
They'll demonetize it for you, which, if I'm being honest,
it bothers me a lot too.
and nothing will happen.
No.
Nothing will happen.
Won't it? As I said, negative things will happen to us if we do it. They demonetize it, put a shadow ban on it, the graph goes like this, and then they cut it off, right? You know, when I said they demonetize it, didn't they mention it? It's a shame. They took the podcast money. I wanted to tell you that what really happens is that those of us who know exactly what I'm talking about,
We know exactly what I'm talking about.
are we facing retaliation? Definitely. I'm known on YouTube because feminists call me a chauvinist and claim I want women to act that way. At the end of the day, I think that first by interviewing you, and now by doing this interview, I'm doing much more for real victims than any institutional feminist has ever done. Don't have any doubt about it.
Damn.
No, and the victims
They thank me for it.
who sent a message,
I told you about it before.
do they abhor feminism? I mean, the victims I deal with, the real ones, do they find everything they see insulting? On that level, just imagine what a victim of Cote Cabezudo thinks of Irene Montero, considering everything that happened with Rubiales' kiss. For example, when they've been destroyed, had no television time, and neither Irene Montero nor Cristina came, will you fail to say, let's take down Cote Cabezudo, and they get hours and hours of television, and it's like, I mean, they're taking down Rubiales? Everything that was unacceptable and everything that was reprehensible, which it is. But it's just an anecdote compared to the real victims of atrocious sexual assaults, right? A millionaire famous soccer player who has to go through what she went through, and that's really bad. But what are we talking about?
It's simply that it's chilling. I want to talk about something very important. To what extent? It's not just that those in power are complicit by omission, but they're complicit because they have an interest and benefit, whether sexually or economically, from the presence of minors. There are several well-known names involved in these circles of sexual exploitation, right? I want to get to the bottom of this. I want all of us to get a little involved since we're here. Because it's one thing to be complicit by having the ability to do something and doing nothing, and it's another thing to be complicit because they're part of the problem. Actively, not by inaction.
El Chor, I didn't understand you, right? The question?
You didn't understand? You didn't understand? The question?
Well, I imagine you're referring to something complicit. Names that, since they're already known, those of us here are aware of. Well,
Being an accomplice, as you said, means having the power to stop this but choosing not to, pretending not to notice because it offers no political gain or votes, and just looking the other way. And it's a very different thing to be an accomplice because you want those circumstances to keep going, because you profit from them either economically or sexually. Because we know that there are politicians who have also, been involved in this.
The case that I find especially repulsive is that of A3 Media, the A3 Media Group. They have so many who are always talking about feminism, about women and all that, and yet they have, as the star presenter of their group, they have Jorge Fernandez, who was involved in at least one session of child pornography in Cote Cabezudo's studio. And he's still there, and the A3 Media Group keeps him there and doesn't lift a finger. Then there's the name of one of the most famous chefs in Spain for years. Number one, Juan Maria Arzac. There's also the name of Odon Elorza. José Antonio Maturana, a historic leader of the Socialist Party in the Basque Country. Huh? Well, I've already given you quite a few names.
I mean, it's not just that they don't do anything to stop it, it's that they don't want anything to be done because they're part of the problem.
well, because in the end, I mean, right? I mean, In the documentary, in their name, there's a witness who talks about parties where Cote Cabezudo took girls, and judges, both male and female, would go, and he gives names. So, of course, right?
Yolanda Domenyo, when?
When a
Maria Victoria Cinto, when a magistrate from San Sebastian, Yolanda Domenyo, who still is, Maria Victoria Cinto, now deceased. May God have her in his glory. Who was also a member of the General Council of the Judiciary.
So, obviously there's an economic component in everything, right? Well, those spheres of power and access, well, I've heard this many times, you know? Mario, when you come to power and through that power you buy everything that money can buy. What's next? Next is what's forbidden. And what is forbidden? Sex with minors. Well, everything we saw around Cote Cabezudo, why? Why is Cote Cabezudo able to survive? Because what he produces is of interest to many people around him, as he used to say. Politicians, television presenters, military personnel, journalists, police officers have passed through this studio.
As China's notaries. Speaking of names, I want to suggest a name, not because of sexual activities that I don't know about, the ones they have and I'm not interested in, but of someone who protected Cote Cabezudo, whose name is Ana Isabel Perez Asenjo, the investigating judge, who finally had to be removed after an appeal from a complaint by Mario Diaz, the lawyer for Cote Cabezudo's victims. Because afterwards, they are the ones who commit those atrocious crimes, and then the ones who protect them. Judges, prosecutors, politicians, who in my opinion have a very serious responsibility.
Am I going to take up that challenge that Melchor throws out to address what we were talking about regarding the difference in treatment, right? Depending on who the victim is, the most harmed victim of Cote Cabezudo, with a violent rape in which she tried to resist 3 times, which is recorded on video. And he overcomes the force she tries to resist with and continues to penetrate her. That victim who suffers that rape and endures more than a decade of child pornographic material being created and exhibited worldwide.
She was a minor.
A minor when the child pornography was made of her and had just turned 18. In that rape, which the court considered proven, it would only be missing, not considering all the other videos in which Cote Cabezudo also penetrated her as proven. But maybe I don't know that you're rapist. Well, after some time, you were very much in agreement because in the following ones, you weren't anymore. She resists, which is something called learned helplessness, when you've resisted and still it hasn't helped at all. A victim learns that defending themselves doesn't help, and that sometimes by not defending yourself and dissociating, you go through a less painful experience. But what was that victim with those serious crimes behind them trying to do? The Provincial Court of Guipuzcoa considers that the moral damage suffered by that girl, by that woman, amounts to 35,000 euros. That same Provincial Court of Guipuzcoa understands the moral damage suffered by Ana Isabel Perez Asenjo, the investigating judge of the case. For what I said about her, it's 40,000 euros.
Were you ordered to pay Ana 40,000 euros? No.
They sentenced me. At first, I was ordered to pay Ana Isabel Perez Asenjo 60,000 in compensation.
She was the judge who was handling the case, the investigating magistrate,
who had to be removed from the proceedings when a complaint was admitted against her for the crime of failing to fulfill her duty to prosecute the crimes of Cote Cabezudo, and who was later cleared of charges. So, of course, it's like, just for speaking out, I caused 60,000 euros in moral damage.
What did you say? Sorry, about her?
Well, the video from March 8th and the appearances I had together with Melchor on a program on Intereconomia and on Gatolago on the Me program,
I like
the cat, Jose Antonio Avellan,
good people.
the jungle or something like that, what happens. By the way, that sentence isn't final. I just received a notice about a clarification order regarding the appeal sentence. And well, I'm working on it. It's not public yet, but I'm letting you know in advance. Here I am preparing a cassation appeal before the Supreme Court to fight that conviction for the alleged violation of the right to honor of Ana Isabel Perez Asenjo. If it's not in the Supreme Court, I'll go to the Constitutional Court or even to Europe if needed.
Aren't you going to pay her?
Because, well, I mean, if the court convicts me and it ends in a final ruling, then it's a final ruling. And that's it. And I mean, what if they're not going to seize my assets? Or, well, then justice will come eventually. We will use every legal weapon at our disposal.
In those cases,
Justice doesn't exist.
Justice crushes you.
Yeah, it crushes you. When it's final, I won't be able to be like Cote Cabezudo. 3 years delaying that compensation payment.
But the point is that you get sentenced to 60,000 euros for a few words.
For a few words. And the victim raped and subjected for decades to child pornographic material. Half, the same court, the same provincial court of Gipuzkoa. Ana Isabel Perez Asenjo is sensitive, but how tough must Cote Cabezudo's victims be?
You as a lawyer, you as an attorney, a person who works in law. Don't you realize that trust in the system is at an all-time low? Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That justice doesn't exist. It's all a sham. There's no absolute freedom. There's nothing, really, only the powerful and the rest. There are first-class citizens and there are second-class citizens. It doesn't make any sense. Nothing you've told me makes any sense at all. That the same court sentences you to pay 60,000 for saying, like, if you call her, like, if you call the worst thing you can possibly imagine, that
is not the case.
which is not the case. But imagine if it had been twice as much for a minor, which was brutal. A mind violated by Cote Cabezudo. And on top of that, if that material was distributed, but
It's also,
on the internet, it's that.
also notice we're in the current context. Because, I mean, the essence of my conviction is that, well, what they're saying is that what I conveyed, right? Well, like it wasn't based on true facts anyway in criminal court. Because while Ana Isabel Perez Asenjo is going through the civil route to try to get me sentenced to pay her millions in compensation, the justice system, right? The prosecutor's office opens a criminal case for the same events that were handled in Madrid, because the program took place in Madrid and there a judge has closed the case, saying that everything this gentleman said and everything I said was absolutely true and of clear public relevance. Because I was truthful and it mattered to the public, there was no insult or slander. So, what am I saying? Is a lawyer being condemned for expressing an opinion about the actions of a judge in a public investigation in a matter of absolute importance? That judge was removed from the case for not fulfilling her duty to prosecute the crimes of Cote Cabezudo. And can I be condemned? When we're listening to the minister of I don't know what saying that such and such judge commits perjury? I mean, crimes are being attributed to judges, and is anyone going to convict Marlaska, Bolaños, or Sanchez for saying that judges knowingly issue unjust rulings? There's no conviction for that, and these aren't judges who have been removed from proceedings for failing to fulfill their duty. So do you realize that what you were saying was right? Since justice is being used as a tool, and as a lawyer, I notice that more and more people think that when they have a problem, the best thing is to solve it themselves. Like Napolitano?
Absolutely, I'm one of those people.
Why should I go to court if the court is just going to trample on me?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but laws have two purposes. You punish a person who commits a crime. First, to serve justice and show society which behaviors are unacceptable. And second, to prevent victims from seeking revenge. That is, no, well, I'm not going to take matters into my own hands to solve this myself because I trust in justice that they will take care of it. So, as an exemplary citizen, I must place my trust and my right for my honor to prevail in the state. When that doesn't happen, when that isn't fulfilled, and we know it isn't fulfilled with the occupation, with, well, a lot of things, people start to say, am I going to call the police if someone breaks into my house? I'm one of the good guys.
What you're describing is the basis of the rule of law, exactly. It's what you study in your first year of law school, philosophy of law. It's a rule of law state. It's that citizens give up the monopoly on the use of legitimate force to the state, which will exercise it on our behalf to protect our rights. Philosophically, if the state breaks that tacit pact where I give it the monopoly on force I could use against someone committing a crime against me or my property, then so when I take justice into my own hands, it's to protect me. The rule of law breaks down when the state fails to do its part, which is that all citizens have agreed that we are not going to be shooting each other to solve our problems. The state holds the use of force. Now, what's happening is that we're seeing more and more that the state uses violence against citizens instead of against criminals.
Exactly.
And so they violate your property, and the one who's most protected is the criminal, not the citizen. And that's because, well, in criminal proceedings, there's a lack of consideration for the victim's role. This was something they tried to solve in 2015 with a law called the Crime Victim Statute, because the victim was a figure that didn't exist in criminal law. In a system unlike the American one, which is purely punitive, in the United States, it's you do it, you pay for it, we punish you.
And in the United States, they have a big advantage over us. They haven't given up the monopoly on violence entirely to the state.
Well, yes, that's a different debate, another topic.
Which, every day, seeing how things are in Europe, makes me say that in the United States, they at least have the tools or the possibility to rise up. If the state becomes a tyrannical apparatus that's going to take away all your rights and all your freedoms, here we are with our asses like this.
Ready, because you also have any crazy person who has access to a rifle. Here you have that too.
But is it good? That's another debate. Yes, that's another debate.
That's another debate where we won't agree.
At least you and I are not going to agree. Melkor. No, well, we'll talk about it later.
But that causes total bankruptcy. Because in law, Spanish criminal law, it doesn't have a punitive character, it has a reintegrative character. That is, the criminal process is designed so that a criminal can reintegrate into society, which we've already proven doesn't happen. In other words, prisons don't reintegrate. Instead, they make criminals even better at what they do. So yes.
But it doesn't happen? No, because in my opinion, the system is flawed. I think it's right for the system to have that goal.
No, of course.
That the criminal can be reintegrated into society. The problem is that in prisons, the proper work isn't done to make reintegration into society possible. In prisons, they just put people in there and...
Prisons are a university of crime, right? You go in because you robbed an old lady with a knife and snatched her purse and got caught, and you come out knowing, right? How to hotwire a car, that break-ins are better, and you come out. You even go in and you come out with a master's degree in crime.
You go in without being a criminal?
Usually, if you go in, it's because something happened.
Or because you've had a problem. No, it's not the perfect analogy for juvenile centers.
There are people who aren't criminals, most of them are criminals. But I'm telling you, a kid who, for traffic points or whatever, they take away his driver's license.
He drives and comes in?
He drives. 5 months in jail. That kid is not a criminal, he committed a crime, but he's not a habitual offender. He hasn't robbed anyone, he hasn't killed anyone.
I understand.
He goes into prison, and when he comes out after those 4 months, he's a criminal. I know a case told by an inmate where a kid like the one I described goes in. And this man, my friend, when he came in, people, well, he would see them. And he says, just by looking at their face, can you tell if it's a guy coming into his territory or not? And he went up to him to say, hey, if you have any problem, I'm here for you. I'm so and all that. And 7 or 8 days later, he runs into him in the yard and says, so, are you okay? Have you had any problems? And he says, no. And besides, I'm getting out in a month. I have 1 month left and I already have a job. My friend asked him, damn, you already got a job in here? He replied, yes, I'm going to work. For this guy, for a Colombian, and he had arranged to work distributing drugs for a Colombian he had met. I mean, he got in for a crime for driving without a license. I'm not saying that's right.
Nope.
And he ended up becoming a good drug trafficker, a drug dealer.
A drug dealer, yes.
And of course, with some social workers there who theoretically were supposed to take care of you.
To make sure that didn't happen.
To make sure that didn't happen.
Because there's an idea, which is beautiful. I mean, the concept of reintegration is like socialism. It's wonderful in theory, but today we see the results. And so, so what happens is that you raise the flag of reintegration. When victims see the true nature of the criminal justice system, it's a betrayal. A victim of Cote Cabezudo said this, has justice hurt me even more?
Yes, I felt more violated by Magistrate Ana Isabel Perez Asenio than by Cote Cabezudo.
That's how it is.
It's shocking to hear that.
To a victim,
wow, it's tough, it's shocking.
It's really tough. Now, to wrap up the show, what solution is there? What can we do? What alternatives do we have as citizens with a certain amount of individual freedom? Unfortunately for them, less each time. What are we? What would you two say? What could we do to have a fairer country?
well, I think the first thing would be for the citizens stop being sheep. I think one of the main problems in Spain is that it's a society that just swallows everything, that puts up with everything.
Everything.
Right? So I think the first step would be for people, right? Be aware that you are a citizen who has obligations and rights, and that you react to the political and judicial reality, that you react, right? The first reaction is on the day you go to cast your vote, right? And without that step, if citizens keep putting up with everything, this has no solution. This has no solution.
Yes, besides, I think that, for me, it would be very important for people to... There's an idea of separation. Do you see citizens talking about politicians as if politicians just appeared?
As if they came from Mars, yeah?
As if they fell from the sky and landed there. Boom, right in Congress. Hey, we put them there, but politicians are disgusting.
And you?
Of course, who places them and politicians?
Who puts them there? Where do they come from? From Spanish society?
Right.
So what is it?
Society
Sick society.
corrupt because everyone, right? With invoice or without invoice? If I can take something from here, can I take it from there too? It's not like that.
I understand it.
Well,
Come on, the thing about the invoice and all that, I get it.
well, but it's...
But I get it. I get the analogy. Well, Melkor, is society corrupt from the beginning? Yes.
Of course, and politicians come from there, and it's the citizens who put the politicians in place.
For me, it's about not wanting to take responsibility because, taking responsibility means doing something and people are comfortable not doing anything. It's like, well, as long as it's not happening to me, I'm in my own world, and personally, well, I Personally, I'm not being violated. Personally, they haven't taken a child from me, not me. But do you see it happening? Everyone is in their own world and acting irresponsibly because responsibility requires effort.
Look, I've found myself, and it's been very depressing for me. On a few occasions, because the truth is, as Mario said, I also feel social support. When you interviewed me, I received a lot of support from people who saw it and so on. But I've also sometimes found myself at a dinner where you go with friends and someone shows up, they introduce you and so on. And they say to me, "Hey, Melchor, man, you're so annoying with Cote Cabezudo, seriously. Just stop talking about Cote Cabezudo all day." And to all of them I say, if it were your daughter, your sister, your mother, would I be annoying or would you think it's okay? And when that's happened to me sometimes, and they say, "Damn, is it you? Damn, all day with Cote Cabezudo?" So annoying, it seemed to me. Very sad to say, so annoying just for reporting it. Facts of the seriousness.
But due to uncomfortable realities,
Which is uncomfortable?
because some people prefer the comfort of ignorance. Exactly, it's uncomfortable to go to sleep knowing this is happening and you're not doing anything about it. That's why
I invite everyone to help Justicia Poetica with just €1 a month,
I'm donating €5. Will it be?
right? And also, well, from you,
We were expecting a bit more.
6.
that also come ready.
That also €6.
Who? I mean, whoever goes in doesn't come out. Because when you do get poetic justice, you will receive a quarterly report of what we do. And from there, you can't get out because it's like, look,
Then we talk about how much I'm going to contribute.
we're in a joke. The one about the 5 now I have to, no, 6 now I have to, that's right, 6 now I have to file charges in a case about trafficking of girls under guardianship by children's villages in Galicia, okay? Come on, govern there?
The progressives don't govern there.
Nope.
That's the People's Party.
But what we're talking about, and it's an endemic problem,
One question before the endemic problem. Excuse me? How often do you think sexual predators try to surround themselves with children? Is that already an indication or not? There are many profiles, the predators who like them, children, what are they going to do? Well, they try to be as close as possible to schools, and well, schools have parents, right? So what do?
of course, the centers, it's brutal. It's the perfect place.
Nothing, not even the girl, has an identification card.
Of course.
Someone's gonna go, that's a beehive, that's the honey. It's like putting the honey there and waiting for the bear to come.
It's a shame, and I appreciate your courage. Let's hope we get at least 1 point.
The essential work and the one who deserves all the praise is Mario. I'm not being falsely modest, it's the truth. And he's the one who's running around all day, taking care of the legal cases, and all the credit goes to Mario.
Well, Mario, you're really great. I really admire your work. I hope we can achieve concrete results in favor of the victims, and above all,
We're already getting there,
also try to create a system in which no more victims are created. That would be ideal. And justice for those who...
Of course, that ultimately depends on social mobilization.
That's why it's very important. I'm going to try my best with these programs. I'm going to try to get you on big podcasts too. Okay, I'm going to try to talk to... I'm not going to say any names here, but I'll do everything I can. I have strong contacts in podcasting. I'll do everything I can to help you reach as many people as possible because I believe it's very important and noble. And I woke up from what I call the matrix when I realized that a large number of our politicians, especially from the so-called premium country of Western democracy, all so grandiose. The United States had some terrible endemic problems of pedophilia among its elites. Jeffrey Epstein, Pizzagate? All of that made me realize, wow, just how bad are we? So anyway, I really appreciate your work, and Melchor, he's here because of you, so it's your work too, Because I met you,
I'm really grateful to you for giving us a voice and for giving us the opportunity to be here.
Spreading the word is crucial.
Absolutely, I feel the same way.
That's all.
Dissemination is fundamental.
I hope, audience, that you have enjoyed this program. And as I always do you want to say something to the audience before we say goodbye?
Tell everyone about it. That once they've seen it, they should recommend it to everyone around them. They listen to these conversations.
And I would say that I always say this, things are the way they are, not because of what the bad people do, but because the good people do nothing. And that
has to end now, and it must. One of my missions in this life is for the good people to be powerful enough to stand up to the bad ones. The problem is that sometimes it feels like the bad guys have all the power, and we're fighting with a nail clipper against an armor that's 2 centimeters thick. But regardless of what we're fighting against, it's our duty to do it. So once again, I want to thank you all, and with this, we say goodbye. That's all for today, and we'll see you in the next episode of LA Factoria.